Okay, so today we started talking about absolute deviation, and this is pretty much a new phrase for everybody. We've seen the word absolute before with our absolute value bars, okay, which we know that means always make it positive. All right, the deviation, okay, and we came up with the definition in class today. How far from average? Okay, how far from average? So if we deviate, all right, if we're looking at a deviation, that is a value that tells us how far we might be from an average score, how far we might be from a normal score. Okay, and as you can see here today, when it comes to calculating absolute deviation, it's a three-step process. So we're going to take you through those here real quick, get you one example to look at. All right, so absolute deviation, to calculate that, first thing we got to recognize is if we want to figure out how far we are from average, we actually need to know the average itself. So step number one is to calculate your mean. And then we need to divide by 7. So we need to add all those up. So we'll do this quickly. 135 divided by 7 gives us an average of 19.3. Okay, so for the sake of this example, we're going to round that to 19. We're going to round that to 19. All right, so that's step number one, calculate the mean. Step number two is to determine all of your deviations. Okay, so now we've got our average. A deviation, remember, is how far from average. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to go back and compare, and we have to evaluate, all right, how far is this first value from our average? So our average is 19, our first term is 30, so that has a deviation of 11. It's 11 from 19. Our second one, 31, that's 12 away from our average. 19 away from our average. Now again, some of you may be thinking that this is a negative 16, but again, we're not really specifying whether positive or negative, because remember, we're talking absolute here, so everything's going to be positive. So we just want to know what's the positive distance between these two values, and that's 16. 17 is 2 away from average, 9 is 10 away from average, and 7 is 12 away from average. Okay? So we establish our baseline, which is our average, and then we get all of our deviations, which is how far we are away. So now we've got 7 new terms. Step number 3 then is to calculate the mean of the deviations. Okay, which basically says we want to calculate the average of all of our new terms. So 11 plus 12 plus 16 plus 19, sorry, those are out of order, plus 2 plus 10 plus 12, divide by 7. So we get 82 divided by 7, and we get a deviation of 11.7. So we're going to just round that to 12. Okay, and remember, in class we talked about this, when we answer the mean, all right, of the deviations, and again, this is called the absolute deviation here. That's what we just found. That's our topic for today. So the absolute deviation for this data set is plus or minus 12. Okay, plus or minus 12. Now, what does that tell us? All right, so what that tells us is, if we look at our original data set up here, okay, what that's telling us is all of these numbers are within plus or minus 12 of being average. Okay, not all of our numbers, I misspoke there. Most of our values are within plus or minus 12 of being average. So if you look at that, plus 12, 19 plus 12 takes us up to 31. 19 minus 12 takes us down to 7. So what we're saying is, if we look at our data set, most of our values are in between 7 and 31. Okay, 7 and 31. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 of our 7. Obviously, we've got two numbers on the outskirts. Those are on the extremes. All right, we could call those outliers if we will. But again, we're not really interested in that terminology today. All we're interested in is coming up with this term, this value, plus or minus 12. All right, so that's standard deviation. Do the best you can on your homework tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.